At 500 meters above the sea, in a desert where it almost never rains, a man is building a mountain out of water. Not a dam, not a reservoir. A cone of solid ice, 30 meters tall, growing in the dark at -20. This is Ladakh, in the far north of India, a high-altitude cold desert wedged between the Himalayas and the Karakoram. The mountains here are the color of bone, and the whole region survives on barely a few inches of precipitation a year. For farmers here, water has always come from one place, the glaciers overhead, melting through the summer. But that meltwater arrives on the glacier's schedule, not the farmers, and the two have fallen out of sync. Here is the cruel gap at the heart of it. The crops need water in April and May, when farmers sow, but that high up, the glaciers don't properly begin to melt until June. So exactly when the seeds go into the ground, the streams run dry, and the obvious fix pump groundwater or truck it in fails on the arithmetic. There's no spare power, no fuel budget, and the water table is deep and stubborn. Whole villages have been abandoned when the spring water didn't come, but an engineer named Sonam Wangchuk noticed something everyone else had written off. In the depths of winter, streams still flow. That water just rushes past the villages, useless, and freezes into flat, useless sheets, millions of liters, wasted every year. Wangchuk asked a stubborn question. What if you could store winter's wasted water as ice and make it melt precisely when the planting season begins? The catch is that a flat sheet of ice melts fast. Too much of it faces the sun, so he changed the shape. A cone, tall, narrow cone, holds an enormous volume of ice while exposing very little of itself to the light, so it survives deep into the warm months, dripping slowly from the bottom. The Ladakhis thought it looked like a Buddhist stupa. The name stuck, the ice stupa, and the mechanism is almost insultingly simple. Pipe water from a stream higher up the valley. Because the source sits above the site, gravity alone puts the water under pressure, no pump, no electricity, nothing to break. At the bottom, the pipe turns upward, and the pressurized water sprays into the freezing night air as a fountain. Mid-flight, in that brutal cold, it freezes layer on layer, night after night, building the cone from the ground up. In the winter of 2013 to 2014, Wangchuk and his students built the first real prototype. It rose 2 stories high and held 150,000 liters of ice, and it lasted into May, long after ordinary ice had vanished. Then, in the village of Phyang, they went big. The stupas there rose towards 30 meters, and each one froze on the order of millions, up to roughly 10 million liters of water that would otherwise have run off and been lost. But as spring warmed, the stupas did exactly what a glacier does, but on the farmer's timetable. They melted from the base, slow and steady, feeding water into channels through April and May, right through the sowing season. On land that had been bare desert, the village of Phyang used that meltwater to nurse thousands of saplings, willows and poplars taking root in ground that hadn't held a tree in living memory. Zero pumps, zero power, just gravity, cold, and a clever shape. The idea proved so robust that it outgrew one valley. Villages now compete in an annual ice stupa contest to build them bigger and better, and the technique has been tried from the Swiss Alps to the mountains of Central Asia. It's worth being clear about what this is and isn't. An ice stupa doesn't make new water, and it doesn't stop the real glaciers upstream from retreating. It's a buffer, a way to catch winter's runoff and hand it back at the one moment it's needed most. But that buffer is quietly radical. It says the answer to a warming, drying mountain might not be a bigger machine. It might be reading the landscape closely enough to store water in the one thing the cold gives you for free. If you want the full breakdown, the physics of why the cone survives the sun, the exact numbers from Phyang, and where the idea is spreading next, the complete story is in the link in the description. Go and see how a frozen desert taught itself to keep its own water.